What's going on, Muscle Monsters? Alain Gonzalez here, and in today's video I want to talk about the big four most important factors in your training. And I want to take these somewhat complicated topics, break them down, simplify them so that you can better understand either why your training program is created the way that it is, or maybe you have a better idea when creating your own training program. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump right in. First thing we'll go over is volume. Volume is essentially the amount of work that you do in a given time frame. Okay, it's your sets times reps times load. Okay, so let's break each one of these down. Okay, first, reps. Why are reps important? Okay, reps are important because they determine how much time under tension we spend during a set. That dictates what energy system we use to move the weight, and thus that will determine if we're training for strength, muscle mass, endurance, or a combination. Okay? Reps are also important because they play toward the total workload. All right, say I do one set of 10 reps with 100 pounds one week, and then the next week I do one set of 12 reps with the same 100 pounds. So my sets are the same, my load is the same, but I move my reps. Now we're doing more volume. Okay? Just like if I were to do one set of 10 reps with 100 pounds, okay, and then the next week kept the volume the same, meaning same sets and same reps, but I did 105 pounds, now the load goes up, right? So the reps help determine the total workload. All right? Sets. Okay, we know that performing multiple sets over just one set will produce about 40% more growth. Okay, but we also know that after a certain number of sets, we start to experience diminishing returns. Okay, a study, I don't remember who this study was from, I'll link it down below, but basically what they showed was that the difference between 2 and 3 sets per exercise and 4 and 6 sets per exercise, I believe, were basically insignificant. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing 4 sets per exercise, but on a continuum, you're going to realize that the solution for more volume is not adding more sets to an exercise, okay? At least not to any significant degree, all right? So that's sets and reps. Now let's talk about total sets for the week, okay, because that's important too. And a recent meta-analysis showed that the sweet spot for the number of sets per muscle group per week is about 10. Now this is going to differ if you're a more advanced guy or if you're a beginner, right? But a good rule of thumb would be about 8 to 12 sets per muscle group per week. Okay? And again, I'm going to link all of this data down below so that you can check it out and make a more informed decision for yourself. Next, intensity. Okay? This refers to how challenging a weight is for you. In other words, a percentage of your 1 rep max. Okay, so let's say, for example, I told you that the perfect number of sets and reps are 3 sets of 10 reps. And you take this pen and you curl it for 3 sets of 10. You're not going to gain any muscle despite doing the right number of sets and reps. Why? Because the intensity is too low. Okay? We have research that shows that although we can build the same amount of muscle with lighter loads, it would take 3 times more work to get the same results. So although it's possible, it's not the most efficient way. All right? Another study compared 3 groups, a high rep group, moderate rep group, and a low rep group. In that study, they concluded that the moderate and low rep groups produced more growth and strength, I believe, than the high rep group. Okay? Which again solidifies the fact that intensity matters. All right? We have to be challenging our body if we want to grow. So a good rule of thumb for how heavy you should be training is 65% of your 1 rep max or higher. Okay? Now, something I forgot to mention when we talked about volume, and that is, now that it ties into intensity, what rep range should we train in? Okay, as a rule of thumb, 75% of our training should come in the 8 to 15 rep range, with the other 25% being a heavier load. Okay, we want that heavier load training to induce strength gains that will then in turn make us stronger during our higher volume work. Okay, so that again is just a rule of thumb. And again, just to clarify, we're talking about building muscle mass. All right, not powerlifting or any strength sport, but building muscle. All right, so volume. 75% of your work should come from the 8 to 15 rep range. Intensity, all of your work should be done at 65% or higher. Okay? And now let's talk about frequency. Frequency refers to how many times we're training per week. Now, obviously, you're not going to be training once per week. All right? We have research that shows that when we equate for volume, 3 training days per week produce better gains than 1 day per week. All right? What I want to talk about is the frequency in which we train a specific muscle group. All right? And right now, with all the evidence that we have, 2 times per week per muscle group seems to be that sweet spot. Okay? And so let's talk about why that seems to be the case, right? So this meta-analysis that was just released not too long ago concluded that training a muscle group twice per week produced more gains than training it once per week, with the volume being exactly the same. Let me explain why this is happening. Okay, say for example, that first group trains their chest once per week. Okay, they elevate muscle protein synthesis, so they're in a growing state. Then that protein synthesis drops to baseline around 36-hour mark, and then it stays at baseline until they train their chest again the next week. Okay, again, this is with volume being equal. The next guy trains his chest, right? Goes muscle protein synthesis goes back down to baseline. By the time it's at baseline, it's time to train his chest again. So he's essentially spending more time in a growing state than the other guy, despite both of them doing the same amount of work. Also, we have to consider the repeated bout effect, which basically shows that the more frequently we train a muscle group, right, to a degree, the faster we're able to recover, right? So our body will start to adapt and recover faster, because essentially we know, okay, we're training this muscle group more frequently, so we need to be ready. Okay, and again, this is just to a certain degree, but it's worth mentioning that the muscle protein synthesis and the repeated bout effect are the reason that training with a higher frequency, despite volume being equal, is more effective. Okay, so rule of thumb, train each muscle group at least twice per week. All right. Now, this may differ. You might want to train a muscle group 3 times per week if you are doing, say, a 3-day full body split. If you're more advanced and maybe you're doing a push-pull, like the push-pull wave that I gave you guys, then maybe you want to train a muscle group twice per week. But ultimately, you want to go for at least twice per week per muscle group. 65% or higher of your 1 rep max. Most of that work being done in the 8 to 15 rep range, with some heavy work incorporated in there somewhere. Right? And then lastly, progression. All right? None of this matters if we are not getting better. Right? We stimulate muscle growth by pushing a certain load, okay, for a certain number of reps, whatever. Our body has to adapt to that load. How does it do that? It builds the muscle necessary to handle that weight. Okay? And so if we give it the same stimulus, we have no more reason to grow any further. The only way that we're going to continue growing is if we continue to increase that stimulus. Okay, and if we can continue to increase that stimulus, then we will continue to adapt by building new muscle tissue in order to handle it. Okay, so a few ways that we can progress. Obviously, we can keep sets and reps the same and increase the load. We can keep the reps the same, the load the same, and do maybe 1 or 2 more sets. Again, there will be diminishing returns with that approach, but it is a viable approach. Okay, that brings me back to frequency. Okay, when we talked about frequency before, the guy who trained his muscle group twice per week to get more gains than the guy who trained once per week was on a volume equated basis, but we can easily throw in a third session for more volume and you can grow that way. Okay, and so another way that we can progress is by doing more reps, right? We keep the sets the same, we keep the load the same, but we push that same load for more reps. Again, this is progression. Another less common way to progress is by increasing the density of the training. So you might do the same sets, reps, and load, but you might finish it in less time, meaning you took less breaks between sets. Okay? And then another form of progression that a lot of people tend to ignore is just getting better. Okay, here's what I mean. If we do the same sets, reps, and load, okay, from week to week, but let's say the first week we were struggling to get that last 1 or 2 reps up, and then the next week we did the same volume, but it was a bit easier for us to get those last few reps in, then we are actually progressing. We're actually getting better. Okay? So, just to summarize, okay? Sets, reps, and load. Most of our work should be done in the 8 to 15 range, with a good deal of our work still being done with a heavier load. Okay? The intensity in which we should train should be minimum 65% and then higher. Okay? The frequency, we want to train each muscle group at least twice per week. All right? And then obviously progression. You have to make sure that in your program you have some sort of way to progress. As long as you are progressing, getting stronger, right? And when I say getting stronger, that doesn't mean just increasing the load. Because if you take the same load and you hit it for more reps, that in and of itself is an increase in strength. If you take the same load for the same reps, but you do it easier, then you've gotten stronger. So again, that's the goal. Get stronger, progress. Okay? So those are the big 4 main factors of hypertrophy. Again, all the research and maybe more that I didn't mention will be linked below. If you have any questions, anything that I may have missed, please leave it in the comments section below. Make sure to grab the push-pull wave. It's completely free. I'll link that below as well, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.